Rama asked again, "Lord, my perception is distorted. How can I attain to that state you have indicated?" So basically Ram wants to see things or experience things as Vasistha does. So how should he go about that? We've got to be careful with this word state. Liberation for convenience is described as a state, but it gives the wrong impression. It's saying a state can be one thing out of many different things. You can be in this state or in that state. So it kind of is there's an assumption here that somehow liberation is an option. And in a way, it really is a stateless state, if you like. Anyway, this is one of the problems we have with the use of words. Vasistha replied, "What is known as liberation, O Ram, is indeed the absolute itself, which alone is. That which is perceived here as I, you, etc. only seems to be, for it has never been created. How can we say that that Brahman has become all these worlds? O Rama, in ornaments I see only gold, in waves I see only water, in air I see only movement, in space I see only emptiness, in mirage I see only heat and not else. Similarly, I see only Brahman, the Absolute, not the worlds." So really, it isn't a state. It's not being caught up in what I've referred to as the cognitive process. It's, I suppose you could say it is a truly objective state, if we're going to think in these terms. We're not getting caught up in categories. The perception of the worlds is beginningless ignorance. Again, we could understand beginningless ignorance as the ongoing cognitive process. Yet it will vanish with the help of inquiry into truth. Only that ceases to be which has come into being. This world has never really come into being, yet it appears to be. The exposition of this truth is contained in this section on creation. I'm going to take the opportunity now to say something about perception. Again, perception is something that arises as a result of the cognitive process. There's actually no such thing. There's only experiencing. And we occasionally will say, there's only experiencing, and then we divide that experiencing into various types of experiencing. We say there's visual experiencing, auditory experiencing, and so on. And then we say that, well, if there's visual experiencing, then there must be somebody that's seeing and something to be seen. So we've got the object and we've got the seer. And then we ask ourselves, well, how does the seer perceive the object? And then we assume, well, the object must be giving something out which the seer picks up, and so on. It gets developed by the idea of light reflecting off the object and into the retina and so on. But this is how the cognitive process works. There's actually no perception. Perception is a way of thinking. It's a result of applying the cognitive process to the field of experiencing. And the cognitive process itself is part of, it's intrinsic to being, which Vasistha describes later on as the infinite vibrating. When the previous cosmic dissolution took place, all that appeared to be before disappeared. Then the infinite alone remained. It was neither emptiness nor a form, neither sight nor seen, and one could not say that it was, nor that it was not. In other words, it wasn't subject to the cognitive process. It has no ears, no eyes, no tongue, and yet it hears, sees, and eats. In other words, no perception is taking place. It is uncaused and uncreated, and it is the cause of everything, as water is the cause of waves. This infinite and eternal light is in the heart of all, and in its light the three worlds shine as a mirage. We're trying to build up relationships here, aren't we? This is what we're struggling with here when we try to understand this. We're struggling with our cognitive process. There isn't actually any relationship between the absolute and the world as it appears. There's no relationship because it's non-different. It's like saying, what's the relationship of my finger with itself? You know, it's as nonsensical as that. But because we've got this idea that there's a world out here, and that we might also have the idea that there's an absolute from which that world arises, then we've got to sort of try hard to understand, well, how does the world arise from the absolute? And the answer is it doesn't. The absolute and the world are two categories created by our cognitive process. And the common situation is for our attention, our awareness, to be caught up with the world and to forget what the nature of that attention, that awareness is. So this is really what we're exploring. When the infinite vibrates, the worlds appear to emerge. Well, this notion of the infinite vibrating. I mean, some people like to think in terms of vibrations, but again, it's just a model, isn't it? It's basically just the cognitive process. It is just something happening. When something happens, the worlds appear to emerge. When it does not vibrate, the worlds appear to submerge. So I think this is why we can think of this vibration as the cognitive process. If you bypass, if you take your awareness beyond the cognitive process, if you take it, that sounds quite mysterious, but all you're doing is taking your attention back to itself, and not getting trapped in the cognitive process. Once you do that, and you're just simply open to the field of experiencing, then the worlds appear to submerge. You stop thinking in terms of things out there, and you stop thinking in terms of perception and objects of perception. Even as when a firebrand is whirled fast, a fiery circle appears, and when it is held steady, the circle vanishes. Vibrating or not vibrating, it is the same everywhere at all times. Not realizing it, one is subject to delusion. When it is realized, all cravings and anxieties vanish. From it is time, from it is perception of the perceivable object. Action, form, taste, smell, sound, touch, and thinking, all that you know is it alone, and it is that by which you know all this. It is in the seer, sight and seen, as the very seeing. When you know it, you realize yourself. All there is a seeing. And within that seeing, we've got our cognitive process constructing seer. Well, we've got the seer, we've got what is seen, and we've got the process of seeing. So we've got seer, seeing, and seen. Well, the process of sight, but it is only just what we call the visual aspect of the field of experiencing, and there's just the field of experiencing. And once you're open to that, well then you realize yourself.